Hello everyone, this is Andrew Lampett. I'm joined with Sanjeev Nath. Welcome to our webinar, Requirements Management within Confluence Integrated with JIRA. We have folks still trickling in a little bit, but we're past the hour, so we're going to go ahead and get underway. First, before we jump into an agenda, I'd like to give you a little bit of a background about zAgile and share with you, first of all, the mission. The mission of zAgile is to integrate teams, tools, processes, and knowledge. And as you'll see in this demo, we're first targeting application lifecycle management and software engineering. But as I describe the platform later, and as you're going to be able to see, this platform is really extensible to any domain and application. So it could be CRM, it could be accounting, help desk with ticketing, etc. We founded in 2006. There you see some other milestones with respect to customers, partners. I invite you to check out the coverage of zAgile. We received pretty nice coverage with InfoWorld and SD Time, so just go ahead and Google zAgile with those news publications and you'll see some nice articles about the company. So the agenda that we have for you today, I'd like to kick off with an overview of what is Wicket Smart. It's actually a lot of different things, but I'll try to give you the big picture overview, and then we'll be drilling down throughout the presentation and demo. And we'll share with you the corresponding benefits that Wicket Smart brings to the table. Particularly, we're going to focus, of course, on requirements management, and that is handled within our product called Wikidsmart PM. As in product management, for product managers. We're going to do a demo, so Sanjeev is going to lead that demo, and then afterwards he'll flip it back to me. I will summarize the content that we've covered here today. I'll talk a little bit about how zAgile can help, and the reason for that in particular is because what you're going to see here is all open source. So, you know, what kind of engagements can we offer to kind of help things along with respect to this open source solution. And then we can suggest some next steps. So with that, I'll dive right in. So I'm going to cover with you a couple major bullet points about Wicket Smart in this overview. So it is a couple major things, and then you'll see a little bit later in this presentation that requirements management is actually kind of a sub-bullet, albeit a very powerful one, but you're going to see first here a couple of the main ideas about Wicket Smart. First of all, Wicket Smart is all about integration. Very powerful, deep integration and interoperability. Today, we're offering integration for software engineering with respect to all the different concepts in software engineering, as you see listed there, requirements, tasks, tests, etc. And also CRM for Salesforce.com. So we have a connector for Salesforce to be able to manage, you know, accounts, contacts, etc. And as this platform is actually quite generic, you're going to see us offering solutions that are available for integration across the enterprise, especially with cloud applications, whether it's Zendesk, which is very popular for help desk and ticketing, Intact, which is very popular for accounting, a lot of different SaaS applications beyond on-premise as well. Secondly, Wicket Smart is a template-based, model-driven composite application platform. So what does that mean? What it means is, you know, we get into a little bit of the weeds of the description of what the platform does and how it does it. You'll see that we enable new applications or solutions. We're increasingly calling these both applications and solutions that are manifested within the environment that you already have. So for you folks who already have Confluence and JIRA, we're not proposing another tool or another application that you would install, rather new capabilities that are manifested within your own environment. So in this case today, we're going to be talking about requirements management within Confluence, integrated with JIRA, and as well with test case management and automation, for example, with Selenium. So indeed, while the title of this presentation is about requirements management, I'd like to continue to emphasize one of the words in the subtitle, which was integration. Because what you're going to see is, even though, you know, anyone can capture requirements within a wiki, the real trick is to capture it in a structured way and in a way that can be easily and automatically integrated with the other aspects of software delivery with respect to creating tasks in the JIRA tracking system, and also traceability with respect to testing. So what are some of the benefits of the Wicket Smart platform? We have several things to cover here. So very interestingly, instant integration. So that's not something you hear every day. When you hear about data integration or application integration, it's simply unheard of and unthinkable to say that you can integrate something instantly. Well, that's what Wicket Smart brings to the table. We don't just say, here's some connectors, now go and figure it out based upon your use cases, how you want to integrate things. No, we say, here is the platform, here are the connectors, plug it in, you've got the instant solution. And I'm going to describe that magic for you in the coming slides. And these are smart solutions. So in other words, everything under, all the concepts understand how everything is related. That enables cohesion of content and information flow between the various tools and applications that are connected. And again, you have these new template-based applications, for example, requirements management. Now you have a requirements management solution that's template-based within Confluence. So you can customize the templates, you can create new ones, for example, to capture requirements or features or project. This also enables powerful, insightful information. So because we're capturing everything in a structured way, guess what? Now when you need to find a requirement in a particular project and the tangentially related tests or the product managers or the engineers or the QA folks who have been working on that, that's all just one click inquiry away. Even though the information might ultimately reside in different source systems, the important thing to know is that Wicket Smart can surface that information in a very user-friendly way, in a very contextual way. Therefore, you can achieve traceability quite easily. That is a basic part of the platform. It's not a extra powerful feature that you somehow have to pay a lot of extra money for. It's intrinsic in the fabric of the platform. And because of all this, you can do dashboards and reports quite easily. You don't have to do a report for the requirements over here and the reports for the tests over here, and now let's try to glue them together in Excel and try to resolve things. No, it gives you a very cohesive view of how that's all connected. Finally, Wicket Smart is future-proof. And what I mean by that is it's ready to grow for tomorrow as your needs grow, as your organization changes, as you add tools, as you remove tools, as you change teams or folks and you expand. It's all ready for that. And why is it? Well, first of all, again, this is all open source, so you can download it, customize it to the extent that you desire. It's based on open standards, so we're not bringing any proprietary driven, this is the way you do things and come learn this Agile way or not. No, it's open standards. I invite you to come look at our website under the product section, under architecture. It describes that in more detail with lots of links to the different open standards that we observe. So we support a number of applications and tools today, but actually that can be extended to really any application or tool, so long as there's a way for the platform to talk to it with respect to an API and the repository of that system. As long as we can talk to it, then it's going to be quite easy to integrate that with respect to the whole software delivery cycle. So as I get into the magic of Wicket Smart, I'd like to take a step back and remind us, we're all familiar with this famous concept of silos of information. And I want to contrast this with the next slide or two as to how it's different when Wicket Smart is introduced into the equation. So with these different silos, I've got a few examples here: Confluence, JIRA, Fisheye. Fisheye, for folks who are not aware, is a way to have a nice view into your source code repository, whether it's Git or Subversion or what have you. But on the left, we see the different categories of this siloed information. Very easily, any application out there, any tool out there, you've got a GUI. You've got some place where you're storing your data. You might store the data in a file structure. You might store it in a database or repository. And then at the bottom, you've got all of these concepts and features and the logic that drive the application. And typically, that's all manifested at the application layer. And you might have capabilities to access that application logic via an API, for example. So that's what, when we all think of an application or tool, that's what we traditionally think of. Here it is, I click install, and there it is. There's the JIRA tool. There's no confusion as to where that's manifested and how it's installed. Now, with Wicket Smart, we changed things a little bit, and we introduced a new concept that does not affect what you already have installed. It augments it in a very powerful way. And what I mean by that is, if you look on the top, we've still got GUI, and if you look at the bottom, we've still got the data store, and that's the source of truth for all the systems involved. And now we introduce this intermediate layer called the Wicket Smart context server. And within the Wicket Smart context server, we have something called a knowledge model. You'll see in the following slides, folks also refer to that as kind of a knowledge graph. And more, I think the terms graph and graph database are gaining popularity and widespread acceptance when you look at folks like Facebook, LinkedIn, Twitter, particularly the social phenomena, when we look at how people and information are related, that's all being powerfully managed by this concept of a graph database, or a graph knowledge graph. So in this situation, if we look at the little blue dots, the little orbs, and how they're interconnected, those are representing concepts and artifacts and processes. So for example, a blue orb there could be requirements. Another one could be test cases. Another one could be software engineering teams. And so what we have here are all these interrelated concepts and artifacts. And this is representing, for those of you who are familiar with business intelligence, a sort of semantic layer. And what that means is how everything is interrelated is provided here. Therefore, if you look on the upper left and take a tool, for example, JIRA and issues. Now that we've got JIRA connected to this knowledge graph, issues in JIRA can be instantly recognized within, say, an application on the right up there, Salesforce. And so what happens is this knowledge model says, aha, you're an issue. I know that you're related to an account because accounts have issues related to them. Or it could be, aha, JIRA, you have an issue, and I know that you're related to this code that's residing in Subversion, via our connector with Fisheye, for example. So this is actually providing a web of information, and it's an overlay, essentially, of your existing environment. So we're not going in and playing with the data with your existing environment. Instead, each tool, again, has its own source of information and data. So again, I mentioned on the previous slide this concept of a knowledge graph. So drilling in a little bit, again, this is encapsulating knowledge of a domain. So out of the box, it's open source, based on an industry standard, an ISO standard. We give you a knowledge model for software engineering. So in other words, we all have different ways of delivering, whether it's waterfall or Scrum or whatever agile methodology you want to use, or maybe hybrid of methodologies. The fact of the matter is, developers create code, code is tested, code is hopefully documented. So you have different people, roles, artifacts, processes, and although we might have different ways of achieving those processes, we all have these same concepts in place. And so we're able to take this ISO standard specification for software engineering and create a knowledge model out of that. And that encapsulates it. And so we've achieved that for software engineering. We also do that for CRM. And as I mentioned, we'll be expanding that to other domains in the future. So what does that mean? When we have this knowledge model, it's going to open up new opportunities that were never before achievable. Things like instant integration of systems. If you've got the connector, plug it in. You've got this Wicket Smart context server, plug it in, boom. Everything is instantly recognized amongst each other. As you plug in a tool, an application, it instantly understands how all of its own concepts are related to other concepts within the environment. That guarantees interoperability, that gives you a unified reporting layer that allows you to find precise information quickly and easily, as well as tangentially related information, which is not always obvious. And then you can answer new questions that were never before possible. Things like, we created this new feature. How much revenue was generated based upon that feature? Thanks to a connection between requirements and maybe particular accounts or contacts within Salesforce, for example. And these new composite applications can be created. So, we're talking here about requirements management. We also have test case management and automation that's also manifested within Confluence Wiki. You can create your own help desk if you want within the Confluence Wiki. You can create whatever other software engineering applications driven by this knowledge model. So very powerful and customizable capabilities. So a little bit about the magic. Now, how is it actually working in action? I have one architecture diagram here, and I'll cover one more before we jump into specifically how we're achieving requirements management. So on the top, you see the different categories of software delivery and CRM. Let's take JIRA, for example, and issue tracking. So you see a corresponding tool or application underneath the category. So for issue tracking, we have JIRA, and then we have different attributes listed underneath that: project, component, release, tasks and issues, etc. So what happens is there's two concepts that are involved here with Wicket Smart when you're doing a deployment. First is the connector, and that connector goes, there's one connector per application and tool. So in this case, the connector brings in the data, only this data, this you could say identifying attributes of the system. So it says, hey, this project information, this component information, etc. Let's import that into the Wicket Smart context server and capture it and integrate it together. So now we know how tasks are related to requirements and how those requirements are related to tests. So that's what happens, is we have the connectors and we have this Wicket Smart context server, which has the knowledge model. Now, moving on to the next slide. Now that allows us to serve these powerful new applications or solutions. So on the left, you see on the upper left, information being captured and integrated within Wicket Smart context server, and in turn that's enabling us to serve and drive powerful new Wicket Smart applications or solutions called PM, QA, etc. And today, we're going to focus on Wicket Smart PM. I just want to go over with you very briefly the different solutions we have out of the box today. So first of all, Wicket Smart PM, requirements management within Confluence, integrated with JIRA and the Greenhopper plugin, as well as integration with test case management. Wicket Smart QA, which I just described a little bit, and then Wicket Smart ALM includes both of those capabilities of PM and QA. Plus, if you'd like to have your continuous integration tool or your version control repository information, if you'd like that all to be in the mix, then we suggest Wicket Smart ALM. And then there's Wicket Smart CRM. So this is the only capability available on the market, as far as I'm aware, that actually allows you to integrate information between Salesforce and Confluence and JIRA. So there are some kind of point-to-point connectors out there who I think assist in moving some data from JIRA to Salesforce, but it doesn't have this intelligence that I'm describing with respect to knowledge models for software engineering delivery and CRM. So it's basically, you got to hardwire how you want that data to be passed. And I'm pretty certain, I could be wrong, I'm pretty certain there is no plugin out there or connection available between Confluence and Salesforce, aside from perhaps a dumb iframe that just displays information within Confluence. So let's talk more about requirements management and Wicket Smart PM. First of all, the challenges. These are probably all familiar challenges, but just to declare them with respect to context for the demo. Your project requirement documents, between a product manager creating a spec and the development actually, creating those features, that's unfortunately an opportunity for disconnect. Likewise, between the specification and testing, That's another opportunity for disconnect in terms of communication and in terms of follow-up. And also with respect to managers, whether you're head of product management or head of QA or head of engineering, having a consistent update and status report that everyone agrees upon is tricky. And likewise, having cohesiveness in general amongst this whole software delivery process is quite challenging. And it's really difficult to measure ROI. So how do we really capture how much revenue was generated for that feature, or how much revenue did that bug cost us? Those are just a couple examples, very high-level examples. As it's very hard to track, what's going on, what's the ROI, and that's what Wicket Smart PM helps with, is to resolve all of these. And we do that with really the capabilities is thanks to the capturing things in a structured way, mapped to our knowledge model, which allows us to have deep interoperability and integration, particularly with JIRA and also with testing. So what you're able to achieve is the complete requirements lifecycle management. So create and manage the artifacts for a product within Confluence. Initiate approval and review workflow processes, leveraging the workflow that's from JIRA. That's one of the very powerful features that JIRA has, and we say, let's go ahead and take full advantage of that. Initiate implementation tasks and workflows in JIRA from Confluence pages. And associate other concepts, so associate the requirements with other concepts as you're going along. And as you're going to see, that can be done automatically, because as you're defining a requirement, for example, there are drop-down windows available that you can say, hey, I want to associate this requirement with such and such project. And that drop-down is populated via a query that goes to JIRA and says, give me the list of projects. And so that's another way that things are automatically integrated for you. And so you can manage requirements, delivery, and quality thanks to auto-generated reports and dashboard that go and they look at the information from these different repositories and they say, here it is. Here's a reconciled view of the status of everything across requirements, engineering, and testing. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Sanjeev. He's going to, I think, go over with you the demo on this slide that he's going to cover with you. And then after he's done, perhaps 20 plus minutes from now, he'll hand it back to me and I'll have some wrap-up comments. Sanjeev?
Thank you, Andrew, and greetings, everyone. Andrew, can you see the screen?
Yes, I can. I'm sorry, I muted myself for just a moment. It looks great.
Okay, great. Thanks. Again, greetings, everyone, and thank you for joining us for this webinar. So, as Andrew had pointed out earlier, there's a number of things that you can do using Wicket Smart for Confluence and JIRA in the context of product management, and you'll see a number of things actually. One, for example, it's very extensible and customizable, because we do not want to mandate any particular structure or process or methodology, as teams prefer to do things independently in terms of their own culture and knowledge and project needs. However, we do provide out-of-the-box templates and queries and reports and stuff so that you can install Wicket Smart and use it without having to do much customization. So what I'd like to do here is to walk you through some of the ways you can do requirements management and how you go about tracking your requirements, how they're implemented, what bugs are logged against them, what test cases have been associated with them, what releases those test cases were executed, and so on. And you will also see a number of different ways you can capture requirements, features, different types of structures, if you will, of these definitions. So let's first start with a project. So we'll go to a project page in Confluence, and you'll see that this is actually a query-generated page. So as you go and add projects and release and component information in JIRA, it will automatically show up here in this table. And then you can start here in terms of creating artifacts related to that particular project. And so we've defined a number of projects. So let's start with, for example, Wicket Smart. And here, against action, there's a number of things we can do. We can create a project wiki page. So this actually acts as an anchor for that project within Confluence itself, so that any related artifacts could be linked to that particular page, if you will, just to make it a little bit easier to organize. It also allows you to extend the attributes of the project, uh, things that JIRA wouldn't potentially allow you to do. So, for example, if we go to Wicket Smart wiki page here, you can see, for example, that we can, we're pulling the description here from within JIRA itself. However, business case, dependencies, risks, these are the types of attributes that we can extend using this page itself. You also see a widget here, and this is something that we provided with Wicket Smart 4, which allows you to basically customize and create a tree-like structure of all different artifacts and sort of hierarchical relationships, if you will. So you can have, in this case, you're seeing all the features that are defined for Wicket Smart or to be implemented in Wicket Smart project. And under these features, you can also, for example, have test cases and tasks and stories and so on and so forth. And then here, in using this page, for example, you can associate a project with stakeholders, so that as you start to define your feature and requirements, then you can actually tie them to specific stakeholders. Now, these stakeholders could be defined within Confluence, or they could come from your CRM. And the idea being obviously that as you're starting to capture requirements and implement them and tie them against stakeholders, you can start to track at a release level who are all the different constituents for that particular release. And of course, as I said earlier, you can capture some of the basic information related to a project that's more pertaining to the business aspects of the project. What's the rationale for it? What are the dependencies and risks and so on? Things that the business stakeholders might be more interested in. So now let's start with this particular project. There's a number of ways we can capture product definitions, if you will, or requirements definitions. And so we'll show you some of those ways. So one way, for example, is you can create feature and stories. In this particular scenario, what we can do, for example, is we can say, okay, let's define a feature called report publisher. And this will give you a templated page that allows you to capture feature and then create stories associated with this feature within JIRA. And so this is where you can link a feature definition in Confluence to stories that are defined within Greenhopper. So starting with the feature, there's a number of things you can do with it. For example, you can define a type of that feature. For example, is it a general functional requirement, or it's related to portability, quality, security, etc. Then you can add reviewers and authors, for example, if you want. To capture that information, you can add summary. So here's some, and then description for that feature. And this is Confluence 4.2, and obviously any of these text fields, you can add rich text and images and other attachments and so on. But in this case, this is a templated form-based page, as you can see, where you're capturing summary descriptions, scope, benefits, and stuff related to the feature, so that its context becomes relevant to anybody who's accessing it and who's wanting to either implement or track its implementation across releases. So once we save this, now you'll see a number of things. First, that the feature is automatically linked back to the project from where we began. It now has some information that is relevant to us in terms of what it pertains to. In this case, it's a functional requirement. And then we can also start to take some actions against it. So once we've defined some high-level description and benefits and stuff related to the feature, we can take some action. So for example, we can create a story. So now if you want to create a story, so this is where you start to link high-level definition. Whoops. It's not linked to the right project. So you can start to actually link high-level definitions of the feature to particular story within Greenhopper. And I'll show you where we've created some of these already. You can also, for example, create design documents and architecture documents related to this feature, as well as you can create test suites within Confluence related to this feature. So let's show you quickly how some of the things that we have done in terms of defining the feature and what that actually looks like. So here's an example of what we had created earlier, a feature that's related to this particular project. And now you can see, for example, down here, all the artifacts or the documents that are created for this feature, what type they are, anything pertaining to the subject of that particular document, as well as stories and implementation tasks created for those stories. So let's try and see if this would work here. If I create a story here for this feature, now you can see, for example, that I can create a story that will link back to that particular feature. And the link back to the feature is through a custom field here. And now I can go ahead and associate it with a particular release. So let's say that we choose release 2 to implement that story. And now you'll see, for example, here's a feature, there's a story associated with it. I can create, for example, development tasks. So in this particular scenario, there's a high-level definition in Confluence for that feature. There's a bunch of stories that are created within JIRA using Greenhopper, which you can use Greenhopper for planning purposes. And then each story may pertain to subtasks, if you will, for develop, that they're actually implementation tasks. So we'll just create some of these. And now if you go back to, oops, if you go back to the story task itself, or the story, you can see that it links back to the feature. And if you go to the feature, for example, here, you'll see the stories reflected here, as well as all the stories and all the implementation tasks are reflected here. And so this is one way to essentially link the activities in Greenhopper to the definitions in Confluence. Let's try some other examples. Another way you can create features or define the product definitions, if you will, is through feature and requirement. So we'll show you how that looks in terms of the structure. So here, for example, I can create again, this is a very different form-based layout, again, linked back to that particular project within JIRA. So now this template shows you a different structure here. You can see, for example, there's feature, description, business case, but this one contains some additional information, such as use cases pertaining to this feature, as well as requirement items that could be parsed out for implementation. So you can add use cases that may describe the feature a bit more. And then you can start to add line item requirement items, for example, here, that will that will then be provided to development team for implementations. So we'll show you some examples of that we've already created in terms of how you would integrate Confluence and JIRA in terms of assigning specific requirement items for development and then tracking. So here's an example of the same form that you just saw that has an association to the project. It also has linked to a test suite, for example. So you'll see here that it has feature detail, description, business case. There are certain use cases associated with it, and then requirement items. Now, what you can do here, for example, is you can start to actually capture, you can initiate workflows from within the requirement item if you would like, or you can start to actually assign development tasks. So if, to initiate a workflow, all you have to do is basically click a button and you will see, for example, that all the workflow states are reflected within the Confluence page itself. And if you were to refresh it, the workflow task is also reflected back here. And then the other thing here is the actual implementation task. So if I was to describe, for example, if I was to assign the task to a particular developer to implement that feature and then select a release, then you'll see, for instance, that this particular task is linked back to that requirement item. And then so that the reference to the requirement is there. And if I want to go back to that requirement, you can see, for example, that it will take me exactly to that page with the full context. Now, let's go to the third way to define projects and requirements or requirements for particular projects. And what we'll show you here is essentially how you can create requirement hierarchies. So I'll just go to the requirements that we've already created here. So let's go to the requirements page. And you'll see that you can not only create requirement hierarchies here, but you can also capture exceptions. So exceptions meaning traceability at the level where if there's a requirement for which a task has already been created and it has been resolved or it was implemented and the requirement changed. So there's a way to actually capture that exception within Confluence, which means that what we offer here are a number of things to support that. First is versioning. So if you look at the requirement itself, you will see, for example, so this is yet another template where we're defining a requirement. And now you can see, for example, that it's managing the current version of the requirement. So this is basically using Confluence page version so that every time you edit or add some content to this particular page, it will update the version. This will allow you to at least be able to know whether something for this particular requirement is changed before the JIRA task had been implemented. Same thing here, you can do a number of other things. For example, you can add additional attributes related to the requirement. For example, you can capture requirement status, its priority. You can associate it with use cases that are also defined within Confluence. And then, of course, if you want to associate people, for a product manager, stakeholder, and a particular project that it may be planned for. So this is a much more sort of a little bit more conventional approach in terms of capturing requirements. But again, the idea is the same. You can create implementation tasks for this requirement. You can define sub-requirements if you want to create a hierarchy, as well as you can define test cases associated with the requirement. And down here, you'll see, for example, here's a sub-requirement that we've created. So as you create additional sub-requirements, they all become part of this table. So you can start to capture if you are creating any kind of hierarchy. If there are any JIRA tasks that have been created to implement this, they automatically will show up here, as well as, of course, any related test cases. And then the other thing, so now, as I said earlier, what you can do, for example, is you can track anytime you're creating a JIRA task, it will capture what version of the requirement was at the point where the task was captured. So as the task goes through its resolution status, then it becomes easier to capture if there are any exceptions. if you want to manage them in terms of changes to the requirements post delivery. And finally, there's a couple of other things. Now, why is it, what's the value of all of this beyond just being able to track the implementation of the requirements? So what we're doing, as Andrew had pointed out earlier, is we are integrating a number of different silos together. So for example, requirements are captured within Confluence, tasks and projects are captured from within JIRA. We also, for example, capture check-in activity from within, using fisheye from Subversion, for example, or GitHub, and so on. So and of course, as I mentioned earlier, stakeholder information from CRM systems. So what you end up with is, as you're starting to integrate all of this stuff, there's a number of things that you can achieve from there. One of them, for example, is you can start to search for things. So for example, here I can actually, this is a faceted search that's also part of Wicket Smart. So I can search for features. So if I just want to look for features, then it's going to give me a list of the features that have been defined. So this is very different from the conventional search that you're normally used to, because here you're not just getting matches on a particular text string. What you're getting actually is all the basically entities of that particular type. So if I'm looking for a feature or if I'm looking for a requirement, then I will only get back in search results those particular items. And it's not limited to anything that's defined in Confluence. So I can also, for example, look for Jira story or Jira feature if I've defined any. So for example, here's all the Jira stories that have been defined. And so the results, as you can see on the left, not only return the information related to that story, but also any of its relationships to other uh, objects or entities within the system. So here, who's the person who reported it, and what feature it's associated with, and so on and so forth. Is there a component it is related to? Are there any releases? So you get all of that information back. And then, of course, furthermore, you can filter your search. So now if I want to actually search for a particular story, for instance, maybe it has certain requirement status, or it's part of a particular, or for release, or so on. So I can define, I can filter this further and say I'm looking for all stories related to Bose demo release 1, for example. So search is one area where all of this integration manifests itself in terms of some very powerful capability. Another one is where you start to actually capture more contextual information in a dashboard format for at the level of a requirement, feature, story, and so on. So let's show you quickly how that might be. And this is, again, what you're going to look at is a dynamically generated view, and it's in real time. So if we go to a feature list, for example, and look at a particular feature. So here's a feature that we had talked about earlier. If you look at the properties view of this feature, for example, now you can see this is, again, a templated view that's basically comprising of a number of different queries. So the summary of that feature, all the related artifacts, what are the stories associated with it, what check-in activities have occurred related to this feature, are there any development tasks, for example, any approval tasks, are there any test suites, what bugs were reported, and what's the test execution history. So this is where it really starts to come together at the feature level, at the release level. So if I go to release 1, for example, then I should be able to see at the release level the general activity, what's happening. What are the development tasks, what are the test execution tasks, what are the features and requirements in this release, and so on. So this is a way of starting to track all of this information across different levels of artifacts, if you will, for a particular project. So, Andrew, I'm going to now turn this over to you. There are a number of questions, so if you want to wrap up, and then I will go through the questions.
Yes. Great job, Sanjeev. Thanks. So it's Andrew Lampett back here. So yes, we'll have, I'll be sure to turn it back over to you for questions. It looks like we have quite a huge crowd with lots of nice questions coming in. So just a few more slides kind of to wrap up, and then we'll get to Q&A. So to summarize, remember, everything you've seen here is open source and ready to go. So you can download it. Everything is working with the templates. You can customize the templates. You can modify the templates or add new ones if you wish, but it's all ready to go. You don't have to kind of figure out how to wire things together. Next, when you think of Wicket Smart, you can think of it in a couple ways. Clearly, the theme of this webinar is about requirements management, and we invite you to go ahead and use that. There are a lot of folks, just to be aware, who say, you know what, I just need to integrate a couple systems or 3 systems, and what we propose is you can use Wicket Smart simply for that. If you want to integrate Confluence and Salesforce or JIRA and Selenium, for example, you can just choose it to use it as an integration platform. Clearly, using these pre-built solutions is a nice way to leverage or to start off using the capabilities, because you have the pre-built solutions already built for you. And remember, Wicket Smart is contextually and instantly integrating the content from any software engineering tool, CRM, and it can go beyond that as well. So what you're getting is ultimately guaranteed traceability, interoperability, and faceted search, and I should add reporting for all of the content in your environment, just as Sanjeev had shown you just a moment ago. And you have these composite applications, so you get requirements management, but you can create new ones if you want, or you can engage zAgile to do so as well, for example. Which brings me to, how can zAgile help? I keep continuing to say this is open source. So, where does zAgile come in with our model, our business model? Well, first of all, we can support you. We can provide subscriptions to these solutions based upon seats per person using the solution, and we can make sure that everything's running at peak performance with respect to helping you tune it with respect to your specific processes. We can deliver services to fast track your deployment. So you might have very different ways of capturing requirements, and we can help you modify the templates. We can essentially do the changes for you, but also ramp you up in case you want to modify the templates yourself in the future. It's actually quite straightforward and simple, but we can help you go faster. And then there's, if you have different tools that we don't support today, or maybe we don't necessarily plan on supporting in the future, you might say, hey, I want to have my IBM or different HP tools integrated in with my environment. zAgile can help you create the connector. You can create the connector yourself. It might take a little bit longer, admittedly, but we have the in-house knowledge, of course, and we can get you up and running and make sure your whole environment is integrated quite quickly. So what do we propose for next steps? First of all, at any time, just feel free to reach out to us at sales@zagile.com that you see down below. If you want to get more information, we invite you to look at the videos. We have a YouTube channel. Also at zagile.com, if you look under the product section, we have various tabs for information, one of those being videos. So we have a whole library of videos to learn about the various solutions we offer. Of course, download Wicket Smart. There it is at zagile.com. Just go download it, use it internally. Make sure to check out the documentation folder to install it with the appropriate versions of whatever you have, JIRA, Confluence, etc. And then if you have Q&A, of course, you can, as I mentioned, send us an email. If you want to see what other folks are saying, there's a couple main different ways to do that. We have a hosted instance of Wicket Smart. If you go to the main page, there's a couple different ways you can access it. But there's links for online documentation and also technical forums. If you just go to those links, that essentially is where the Wicket Smart instance is hosted. And if you have questions, or if you want to review Q&A, just post the questions to the comments section of the wiki page, and either community members or zAgile staff will follow up with those questions. Also, we do have a group on LinkedIn. So I invite you just do the search for Wicket Smart, and we'll get you on board to see various announcements, for example, webinars or articles or tips and tricks. And it's just another opportunity to network with other folks using Wikismart or learning about Wikismart. So that's all I have. And what I'd like to do now is turn it over to Sanjeev. I think you've got a pool of questions coming in. Do you want to field those, Sanjeev, and then we can wrap up?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Andrew. So I'll just go through a few of them. So first question is related to requirements management using Wicket Smart for software and hardware. So I think, I mean, would definitely would be interested in exploring that in terms of more specific need here. But we have discussed that with others in the past, and it's the way to you can do that. For example, is to you can type the requirement and associate them with, for example, either components or define certain requirement type groupings, if you will, so that you can capture requirements related to hardware or software documentation, for instance. You can do the same level of typing for bugs and other tasks and so on that you are creating in JIRA. So I think I would need to understand that a little bit more in terms of answering it better. But in general, because you can add attributes related to requirements and other artifacts that you're creating, extend the attributes and also establish relationship with other entities. So for example, if there are components and they're defined as hardware components or software components, then requirements can be easily linked to those. So hopefully that answers part of this. The next question is whether Wikidsmart requires equal number of JIRA and Confluence. So the answer is no. Andrew, do you want to elaborate on that in terms of license policy for Wikidsmart?
Sure. It sounded like the question was, is JIRA or Confluence required?
No, it's whether equal number of JIRA and Confluence users are required for Wikidsmart license.
Oh, excuse me. Yeah, sure. I can comment on the licensing. Now I see. Um, so what we're the Wicked licensing is based upon users of the Wicked functionality, whether it's requirements management or test case management, for example. So in other words, if you have an unlimited Confluence or JIRA license, or if you have 500 or 1,000 seats, we're not licensed based upon that. Rather, we're based upon the number of folks. Typically, it's going to be some portion of the engineering and product management team and QA, for example. And that's on an annual basis. There is a minimum commit, which one of us can speak with you offline or via email as to how that works. But essentially, it's a combination of annual seats plus services. So, for example, a minimum number of 25 seats plus a number of days for consulting and training, for example. Are there other questions, Sanjeev?
Yeah, thanks, Andrew. So another one is related to workflow states. I mean, what you saw there that was projected within Confluence for example, approval, those are actually workflow states coming from JIRA for that particular issue type and project. So this is basically the tight integration between Confluence and JIRA that Wikidsmart provides. So in this case, depending upon the issue type and the project, you can create different workflows and drive them from within Confluence for either requirement or document or feature at different levels. And then there's another question which is really related to mapping requirements, not just in terms of to the requirements themselves in some hierarchy, but to other system level components, other physical elements, if you will, higher level or lower level. So I think again, this is there's a number of ways you can achieve that. One is you may need to extend the meta model underneath to capture the definition of the components themselves. Are they hardware components or are there different types of artifacts, for example? There's a lot that it already comes with in terms of definitions, both software, hardware, at least at the abstract level, the concepts are there. and also document, but those can be extended further if you want to specify physical components to which requirements need to be linked. That's one aspect of it. The other is that the relationship between requirements, sub-requirements to other objects within the system can also be extended. So there's no constraints there, and it's simply a matter of as long as the concepts exist within the meta model, then the templates can be modified to both reflect the relationship, but then also then queries will continue to support it in terms of if you want to see at a particular physical element level all the requirements that are associated with it and all the sub requirements for that and so on. So hopefully that answers that question. I think that was it, Andrew. I think we're getting closer to our hour
Great.
now.
Yeah, I think we're top of the hour, so we need to conclude. We had a fantastic turnout today. Thank everyone. Thank you everyone for your time and attention, and we look forward to corresponding with you after the webinar and in the days and weeks to come. Thank you very much. This concludes the webinar. Bye-bye.